Farmhouse in Georgia, smoke rising from the chimney, chickens moving through the yard like they own it. A garden where someone has been working the soil for years, not abandoned. Lived in, loved. A truck pulls up to the gate, a man gets out, like someone trained to read danger before it announces itself. He has legal documents in his jacket that say this land belongs to him. He has been gone for 10 years, and he has no idea what he is about to walk into. 8 steps up the gravel drive, the front door opens. A small boy appears on the porch, 5 years old. Holding a wooden rifle painted red, he plants his feet, points it directly at the man's chest. His voice doesn't waver. You need to leave. This is our house. And somewhere inside, hidden under a floorboard for 10 years, is the reason this man can never leave. A truck had been running since 4 a.m. Georgia came in pieces through the windshield. Pine trees, red dirt shoulders, fence posts leaning the same direction, like they'd made a decision years ago and just kept it out of habit. But sky couldn't make up its mind between gray and gold. It sat somewhere in between, undecided, the way early morning sometimes is. Biscuit had his chin on the door handle, back paws hanging off the seat edge, eyes half open, not sleeping, just present, the way dogs are when they've decided their whole job is to be near you and they're taking it seriously. Darnell hadn't turned on the radio since Macon. The silence was fine, better than fine. Silence didn't need anything from him, but sat there and let him drive. That was all he needed from it right now. 38 years old, a duffel bag in the truck bed, a dog who trusted him more than he deserved. Letter from Carver County folded into the glove compartment, folded and refolded until the creases had gone soft, that he'd been carrying 4 days without opening a second time. Because once had been enough. Final notice. A property tax delinquency. Parcel 77-3, Aldine Road, Carver County, Georgia. 30 days to settle the outstanding balance or the county will move to auction. He'd read it standing in a hardware store parking lot in Macon on a Thursday afternoon. Oak sitting on the tailgate eating a sandwich that tasted like the plastic it came wrapped in. Biscuit watching him with that patient look. The one that communicated without any urgency that something was being waited for. Evan, the last of the sandwich to Biscuit, sat there watching a man load sheet metal across the lot, stacking it with the rhythm of someone who had done this 10,000 times and stopped thinking about it long ago. 10 years. I've been getting letters from that address for 10 years. Letters from the county. Letters from the estate attorney. Letters from a woman named Dolores at the Carver County Records Office, whose handwriting slanted left and whose patience somehow made everything worse. He read everyone, folded them back, over another 200 miles in whatever direction felt least like backward. He wasn't proud of it. He just couldn't stop doing it until 30 days. Until Macon. Until he'd run out of direction, so he turned south. About 10 years on the road is that you develop a talent for not arriving anywhere. You get good at motion. You learn which diners open at 5, which motels don't ask questions, which jobs need hands, and don't care about the gaps in your history. You learn to keep your life small enough that it fits in a truck cab and a duffel bag and the warm weight of a dog against your leg at night. Darnell had been a Navy SEAL for 8 years. He'd been out for 10. People thought that transition was the hard part. And it was. But the harder part, the part nobody warned you about, was discovering that the skills that kept you alive in the field were exactly the wrong skills for the life that came after. Hyper-vigilance, compartmentalization, ability to shut something off inside yourself and just keep moving. He'd been moving for a decade, not running. He'd told himself that for a long time. Just moving, just not ready, just not yet. The flashback never came gradually. It never did. Placed a phone ringing in the dark, 3 in the morning, his bunk at a naval base in Virginia. A voice he didn't recognize. His parents' names, Highway 16, December, black ice. The words impact and instantaneous, and I'm so sorry. They'd sat on the edge of that bunk for a long time. Then he'd gone to the bathroom and held both hands under cold water until they stopped shaking. He never went back to that bunk. 6 weeks later, his service ended. He should have driven south. Back to Georgia. Back to the farmhouse where he'd grown up, where his mother still had his childhood drawings in the kitchen drawer, where his father's work boots would still be by the back door shaped to his feet. He should have. Instead, drove north, then west. Took jobs. Slept in the truck more nights than not. Biscuit came into his life 2 years after. German shepherd from a shelter outside Atlanta, who chose Darnell by the simple method of sitting directly on his feet and refusing to move until the paperwork was signed. The shelter worker said, "He doesn't do that with just anyone." Darnell didn't know what to do with that. He still didn't. But Biscuit had been on the passenger seat ever since. Now Georgia was opening up around him, fields on both sides, the sky finally making up its mind about gold. Biscuit lifted his head, looked at Darnell, looked at the road, then put his chin back down. "I know," Darnell said. He kept driving. Carver County hadn't changed much. A gas station with one pump working. A diner with a hand-painted sign missing the E in open. A post office that looked like it was built in 1943 and painted once since and left alone after that. The kind of small town that exists between bigger towns. People drove through more than they drove to. Darnell pulled in for gas. The woman behind the counter glanced at him, then at Biscuit through the window, then back at Darnell with the look of someone who had been reading strangers for 30 years and kept the results to herself. "Passing through?" "No." She nodded. "I can push." Small town people were good at that. They knew when a person's answer meant exactly what it said. He bought coffee, held a cup of water for Biscuit in the parking lot while the dog drank slowly in the morning cold. Then they got back in the truck and turned onto Aldine Road. The road was familiar in the worst way, the way you recognize a song you haven't heard in years. You don't remember knowing it until it starts. And then you know every note, every word, like turn, and some part of you wishes you'd stayed in the parking lot a little longer. The Becker farm on the left with the rusted mailbox, the stand of loblolly pines that had grown taller than he remembered, a dip in the road where water collected every winter. His mother used to call it the Devil's Puddle because she'd driven into it twice and considered it a personal failing of the road's character. He passed the dip slowly. Biscuit sat up, and then the house came into view. Darnell took his foot off the gas. The truck slowed almost on its own, like it understood this required a different speed. Here is the thing about 10 years. When you stay away from a place that long, you build a picture. You can't help it, like needs something to hold. So you construct a version. Roof caved in somewhere, windows gone, front porch rotted through. 10 years of Georgia summers and nobody home. Prepare yourself for a specific kind of damage, the damage of a place that gave up waiting. He'd built that picture somewhere around Macon. He'd been carrying it all 6 hours, and now it was wrong. The fence was standing, not perfectly, patched in 2 spots with lumber that didn't quite match, but standing. The front door was on its hinges. The porch steps were solid, smoke thin and steady, rising from the chimney, not a fire someone had just lit, that had been going for hours. A fire that belonged to a morning routine, a chicken coop in the side yard. His parents had never had chickens. This one was uneven, clearly built without a blueprint, and wood from at least 4 different sources. But the chickens inside were real and calm and making their unhurried sounds, like they'd been there always. Like they belonged exactly where they were, a shovel leaning against the oak tree by the driveway. Like someone had set it down an hour ago. Darnell stopped the truck at the gate. He sat there, "Yeah," Biscuit said, or didn't say, indicated so clearly with one look that it amounted to the same thing. "Yeah." Darnell agreed. He got out. The gravel under his boots made the same sound it always had. That particular crunch of loose stone over packed dirt. Felt this driveway 10,000 times. His feet remembered before his head did. He'd taken maybe 8 steps when the front door opened. A woman stepped onto the porch, late 20s. Black natural hair pulled back, flannel shirt with the sleeves rolled up past her elbows. She stood at the top of the steps with her arms at her sides, not crossed, not reaching for anything, just there, holding her ground without making a production of it. Behind her, visible through the screen door, someone else. Same height, same general shape, watching him with a different quality of attention. More sideways, like she was working out angles. Twins. The woman on the porch didn't say hello. She said, "I help you?" Not a question. The shape of one. Biscuit stopped beside him. "This is my property," Darnell said. "My name is Darnell Cooper. This farm belonged to my parents. The taxes have been delinquent. I'm here to settle them and react the way people react when they've been caught doing something wrong." Her expression shifted. Something behind her eyes adjusted. But it wasn't guilt, a recalibration of someone who had been managing hard situations for a long time and was deciding whether this one qualified as dangerous. "We've been here 5 years," she said. "We didn't know anyone owned it." "I know." "Who didn't know?" She held his eyes. "I'm Vanessa Carter. That's my sister Monica inside." The silence that followed was strange, not hostile, just the quiet of two true things sitting in this space without resolving each other. He hadn't known. He hadn't been here. Both facts were real. Neither one cancelled the other out. "Vanessa," said the voice from inside. "Careful, low." "I see it," Vanessa said without turning, and then the screen door hit the porch railing with a crack. A figure came out fast, like something released under pressure, 5 years old. Small, absolutely certain himself, he was carrying a rifle, wooden. Roughly made, one end clearly a barrel, one end clearly a stock, the whole thing painted with what appeared to be red nail polish, for reasons Darnell chose not to examine right now. The boy planted his feet at the top of the steps, pointed the rifle directly at Darnell's chest. No wobble, completely level. "Don't move," the boy said. "You need to leave right now. This is our house." Darnell didn't move. Biscuit sat down. Darnell looked at the boy, then at the rifle, then at Vanessa, who had closed her eyes in the specific way of a person enduring something they cannot prevent. Then back at the boy. Darnell raised both hands. "All right," he said. "I surrender." The boy blinked. "Completely? Completely. What does that mean?" "It means you win." The boy looked at Biscuit, skeptical, working something out. "What about the dog?" Biscuit surrenders too. Biscuit on cue lay flat on the gravel, chin between his front paws. I stared at this for a long moment. He had not been expecting full surrender. He was clearly working out what to do with it. "Ellie." Vanessa's voice, firm. "Come inside." "But he has papers." "He showed me from the driveway." "Come inside." They lowered the wooden rifle approximately 2 inches. Then he looked at Biscuit again. Biscuit thumped his tail once against the gravel. One slow thump, which was apparently sufficient. Uli walked down the steps and sat directly next to Biscuit, placed one hand on the dog's back with the authority of someone who had just been assigned an important function. The tension didn't disappear, but it got smaller, small enough to work around. Darnell reached into his jacket slowly. Both women stiffened slightly, just enough to notice. He slowed his hand further, drew out the folded documents, the tax notice, the deed paperwork, letter from the county recorder, and held them toward Vanessa without stepping closer. She came down the steps and took them. Ride without speaking. That kind of composure isn't something you're born with. It's built from years of needing it and not having anything else. He recognized it. He'd spent 8 years around people who had the same quality, people who had learned to receive bad information without letting it move their faces. Handed the pages to Monica without a word. Monica read faster, looked up at Darnell, looked at Vanessa. "It's real," Monica said. "I can see that, Vanessa." "I can see it, Monica." Vanessa handed the documents back to Darnell. "I haven't damaged anything," she said. "We've repaired things. The roof over the back bedroom was open when we arrived. One window was broken. The porch rail on the left side had pulled away from the post. We fixed everything." Pause. "Own food on the land. We haven't sold anything from the property itself. Only what we've raised and made." I noticed that too." She looked at him for a moment, measuring something. "You're not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "Like someone already on the phone with the sheriff." Darnell folded the documents and put them back inside his jacket. He looked past her at the front door, which stood open. From the driveway, he could see the hallway. The floor swept clean. A coat hook on the wall with a child's jacket and a woman's scarf. His mother had put up that coat hook. He'd stood on a chair beside her, holding the level while she drilled. He was 9 years old, frustrated with the angle for 3 days before she was satisfied. He could still remember the sound of the drill, the way she'd step back and look and frown and then look again. Something in his chest moved. Not painfully, just moved. "Not calling anyone," he said. Vanessa's shoulders dropped a fraction. Not relief, exactly. The first loosening of something that had been held very tight for a very long time. He stepped up onto the porch, stopped in the doorway, in building readiness for this moment since Macon. Since he turned onto Aldine Road, he'd constructed it carefully, The way you build something that needs to hold weight. It held for about 4 seconds. Then he saw the photograph. Left wall of the hallway. A frame he recognized. Dark wood, slightly oval, the kind his mother had found at a church sale, and refinished herself with a stain that smelled like vinegar for a week. She'd been proud of that frame. Him about it on a phone call like he could see it through the receiver. The photograph inside wasn't one he'd ever seen. His parents standing in front of the farmhouse, younger than he last remembered them. His father, maybe mid-40s, mother the same. Her head turned towards something just off camera, caught mid-law. He'd forgotten that laugh. He'd forgotten the shape of it on her face. Beside his parents, slightly to the right, stood a man, 50s, right through the shoulders. Smiling in the careful way of someone very aware of how they look when they smile. Darnell studied the face. He didn't know it. Not yet. But something registered below the level of recognition. A wrongness he couldn't name, because he didn't have enough information to name it yet. He filed it away. Where did this come from? He said. Vanessa came to stand beside him. We found it under the floorboards in the back bedroom. Replaced a section of the subfloor that had gone soft. There was a loose board, and underneath it several things. That photograph was one of them. You don't know who the man is? No. We thought maybe a family friend. Someone from before. Elle looked at the photograph a moment longer. His father didn't hide things. Thomas Cooper was the most straightforward person Darnell had ever known. A farmer. A plain speaker. A man who kept everything in its proper place and said what he meant. He didn't hide things, because he'd never thought he had anything that needed hiding. So why was this under a floorboard? He stepped fully into the house. Air didn't carry the stale weight of a place abandoned. Someone had swept the floor. Boards that should have rotted had been replaced. Mismatched lumber, not beautiful, but solid underfoot. A fire in the wood stove. On the kitchen table, from the hallway. A jar of wildflowers in a coffee can. This wasn't survival by accident. Someone had decided this place was worth keeping, and then done the work. He was still standing there when the back door opened, slow footsteps, unhurried. The sound of someone who moves at their own pace and doesn't apologize for it, an older woman, late 60s. Black and white hair cut short and close, hands that showed decades of use. Not just physical labor, layered quality of someone who had graded papers and kneaded dough, and planted things and turned pages. All of it leaving its mark on the same pair of hands. She carried a basket of garden vegetables. Collard greens, sweet potatoes, small onions with roots still attached. She stopped when she saw Darnell. He stopped looking at the hallway. They looked at each other, and she said, "You have your mother's eyes." Not your mother's name. Not I knew your parents, just the eyes. As if that was the essential fact. And everything else could follow in its own time. Darnell didn't answer immediately. He'd heard that all his life, relatives at the funeral, his father's old friends, a woman at the hardware store in Carver who sold seed packets to his mother every spring. Patricia's eyes, they always said. He hadn't heard it in 10 years. He'd forgotten how it landed. You knew her, he said. We taught at the same school. Bateman set her basket on the hallway table. Carver County Elementary, not at the same time. She was there before I started. But she came back once for a book fair. We met maybe 3 times total. A pause. Recognized you from a photograph she kept on her desk. I found it in storage about 4 years ago, going through old boxes. She extended her hand, Lorraine Mitchell. Everyone calls me Miss Lorraine. He shook it. Darnell Cooper. I know who you are. Simply. Without drama. She kept that photo for years. He didn't know what to say to that. Neither did she for a moment. Then Miss Lorraine picked up her basket and walked to the kitchen like she'd been doing it for years. Like as it turned out she had been. Sit down, she said over her shoulder. I'll put the kettle on. Ate at the kitchen table, all of them. Vanessa across from Darnell, arms on the table, meeting his eyes directly. Monica beside her sister, watching him with that sideways attention, still calculating. Miss Lorraine at the end, lady filling the kettle without asking. Eli on the floor next to Biscuit, wooden rifle across his knees. On standby, in case things went wrong again. Darnell looked at each of them in turn. Then he said, "Tell me." Vanessa looked at Monica. Monica looked at Vanessa. 4 seconds of conversation without a single word. The kind siblings develop from living through the same thing so many times that words become unnecessary. Vanessa turned back to Darnell and started talking. 5 years ago, Vanessa and Monica had been moving through Georgia the way people move when there's no center left to orbit. Seasonal work. Motel rooms when the money held. Monica's car when it didn't. Vanessa was 3 months pregnant. Anne, who should have been part of that, had looked at the situation, done a quick calculation, and found a reason to leave. Their foster father had been more direct. Get out. Not in anger, exactly. More like he'd been waiting for a reason. And finally was. Monica had taken Vanessa's hand and walked out with her. November. Cold the way Georgia November is cold. Not dramatic, just relentless. 2 weeks in the car, then a shelter in Milledgeville, not enough beds, 8-day maximum stay policy. Then back in the car, then Monica had driven up Aldine Road one evening looking for a field entrance where they could park out of sight from the highway. She'd seen the farmhouse, dark in every window, light hanging open, weeds working their way up the porch steps. She drove past it twice, then she turned in. We checked, Vanessa said. We knocked. We waited 2 days before we tried the door. The lock was already broken. Not defensive, Monica said. At least accurate. We weren't going to stay. Vanessa stopped, started again, just until we figured out what came next. But then Eli came, born in this house, with Miss Lorraine's help. She'd been living 3 miles down Aldine Road at the time, renting a small house from a neighbor. She arrived with a casserole the first week. She stayed when it became clear that no one was going to a hospital and someone needed to be there. After Eli, leaving felt impossible in a different way. So they stayed. They fixed the roof, patched the broken window, built the chicken coop out of salvage lumber, and the stubbornness that comes from having no other options. They planted, learned what the land would give and what it wouldn't. Tried again the following season. Miss Lorraine had driven over regularly in those early years, helping with Eli, sharing what she grew in her own garden. 6 months ago, the landlord sold the rental property, and the next available place was 3 months out. Vanessa had simply said, "There's a room." No ceremony, just, "There's a room." Darnell listened to all of it without interrupting. Explained themselves mid-story. It's never really about you. It's about them needing the discomfort to stop. He let them finish. Then he was quiet. Biscuit had moved from the floor to lean against Darnell's leg under the table. I had migrated from the floor to lean against Biscuit. The wooden rifle rested against the wall. "Stood down, you said you found things under the floorboard," Darnell said. Vanessa nodded. What else was there? Monica got up without speaking, back from the back room with a small cardboard box, set it on the table. Darnell looked at it, not at the box itself, at the handwriting on the side, his father's handwriting. Precise, slightly tilted right, the printing of a man who taught himself to write clearly and never quite made it to cursive. Darnell. "When you're ready." Darnell looked at that for a long moment. "You didn't open it," he said. "No," Vanessa said. "Neither of you?" He pulled the box toward him. Without planning it, everyone found somewhere else to be. Monica went to check the back rooms. Vanessa moved Eli to the far end of the table with a drawing project. His back turned, head bent. Lorraine set a cup of tea near Darnell's elbow and walked out of the kitchen without a word. Just the box. Just him. He sat with it for a full minute before he touched anything. Kitchen smelled like wood smoke and something baked earlier in the day. A smell that reached back past 10 years of parking lots and gas station, coffee and motel rooms, back to mornings that had seemed ordinary at the time and only revealed themselves as something else after they were gone. He opened the box, a photograph. His parents in their mid-30s, standing in front of the farmhouse the year they bought it. The oak tree barely taller than his father's shoulder. Of them looking at the camera with the faces of people who have just done something terrifying and are trying not to look like they have. His father's watch, over with a leather strap repaired once with electrical tape, because the tape worked fine. And that was that. The crystal cracked in one corner, his own birth announcement printed from a home computer. And Patricia Cooper are pleased to announce, 8 pounds, 4 ounces. And in the margin in his father's handwriting, already causing trouble, a small notebook, navy blue cover, hardware store variety, $2, had kept them for years, feed schedules, repair lists, weather notes, the working record of an ordinary farming life. Darnell turned through the pages. Fence repair, February. Cease order, March. Water pump gasket, June. Page after page of plain documentation. A life that knew what it was and didn't need to be anything else. He nearly closed it. Then he turned to the last page. 2 lines. Written heavier than everything else. On every other page, Lane sat light on the paper, here it pressed down. The letters deliberate, the writing of a man who needed to be certain something would be read. $47,000. Do not sign anything he gives you. Not anything. Whatever he says. No date. No explanation, just the name. The number. The warning, Darnell read it 3 times. Then he set the notebook down and looked at the wall. His father was not a man who wrote warnings in the backs of notebooks. His father was not a man who hid things under floorboards. His father was not a man who left boxes labeled with his son's name. When you're ready, in case something happened, except apparently he had been all of those things. Done it without telling Darnell, without calling, without any of the usual methods a man uses to get a message to his son. He'd done it this way, box under the floor. Name on the side. When you're ready. Which meant he'd known something might happen. He'd known enough to prepare for it. And what had happened was Highway 16, black ice. The words impact and instantaneous. Darnell closed the notebook. Atik sat in the kitchen with the sound of Eli's pencil at the far end of the table, with Biscuit's slow breathing against his leg, with the chickens outside being peacefully indifferent to all of it. Art about a name he hadn't heard before today, Raymond Harris. $47,000. Not anything. That evening, after dinner, Darnell went back to the photograph on the hallway wall. The man beside his parents, heavy through the shoulders. That careful smile. Darnell looked at that face for a long time. He still didn't know the name, but he had the feeling. The one that had registered when he first saw it, below recognition. A wrongness he'd filed away. He had a name now. Raymond Harris. He didn't know yet what connected the name to the face. He didn't know what the $47,000 meant, or why his father had written the warning with that kind of weight. He didn't know what this man had to do with a box under a floorboard, and a photograph hidden alongside it. But he was going to find out. That was the first clear thought he'd had in 10 years that pointed somewhere specific. Darnell slept in the truck that night, not because there wasn't space. Vanessa had offered the couch without quite meeting his eyes, which was its own kind of grace. The offer was genuine, but the house was small. The situation was strange. Nobody needed a man they'd known for 7 hours, sleeping in the next room. He thanked her and said the truck was fine. It was fine. He'd slept in it enough nights that the cab had its own familiarity. The angle of the headrest. Biscuit arranged himself across the passenger seat when he was off duty. The sound Georgia wind made against the side windows when it came across open fields at night. He'd loved that sound as a kid. They hadn't thought about it once in 10 years. He lay on his back looking up at the ceiling of the cab, the notebook on his chest, one hand resting on Biscuit's side, the name sitting in the back of his mind like something he'd accidentally memorized. Raymond Harris, the man in the photograph, standing beside his parents with that prepared smile. His father's warning pressed deep enough to read from the other side of the page. Around 2 in the morning, the back door of the farmhouse opened. Light footsteps on the porch. Not coming toward the truck, just someone standing outside in the dark. The way people do when the inside of a house gets too small for whatever they're carrying. Darnell lay still. After a few minutes, footsteps went back in, the door closed. He thought about his mother in the photograph, her head turned towards something just off camera, caught mid-law. He'd heard 1,000 times growing up, and had completely forgotten the sound of, until he saw the shape of it on her face today. That was the thing about 10 years of not going back. You lose things in pieces, quietly, without noticing, like all at once, one by one, the way you lose small objects during a long move, until one day you reach for something you were certain you had and it simply isn't there anymore. Lost the sound of his mother's laugh without knowing it was gone. Darnell pressed the heel of one hand against his mouth. Breathe through whatever came up. Let it move. Don't hold it. Don't chase it. Just let it move. He lowered his hand. Biscuit stirred, resettled, put his chin on Darnell's arm. The wind came back across the fields. Low and steady morning came without ceremony. Grey first, then the slow accumulation of pale gold that passes for spring light in Carver County, not arriving so much as building. Darnell was up at 5, old habit, the kind installed so deep it stops being a choice and becomes simply what your body does when the dark starts thinning. He walked the full property before the house stirred, not inspecting, not making lists, just walking, getting the measure of ground he'd grown up on but hadn't touched in a decade. Relearning it the way you relearn a language you once knew, not by studying, by moving through it until the shapes come back. The east fence needed work. 3 sections down, 1 post gone soft at the base, the whole run pulling with it. He'd fix that first. The greenhouse behind the house stopped him for a full 5 minutes. He stood at the edge of it in the early light and just looked. Salvage lumber for the frame. Plastic sheeting in 2 layers, a deliberate gap between them. A low-tech insulation approach that required real thought to arrive at. Raised beds inside, made from materials sourced from at least 4 different places, fitted together with enough care that they held seedlings already growing, collard greens, onions. The beginnings of something that looked like beans. His mother had grown tomatoes in this spot. One summer she'd tried peppers and declared them a personal insult. Then tried again the following year out of principle, and been insulted again. He stood there and let himself remember that. Then he went to find the post-hole digger. Breakfast happened the way things happen when people share a kitchen without a system. Miss Lorraine was at the stove when Darnell came in from outside, making eggs without consulting anyone on preferences. Ate enough for 5 and set the plates out with the efficiency of someone who has fed other people for so long it requires no thought. Monica appeared from the hallway, hair still damp, already dressed. She sat across from Darnell, ate coffee, looked at the eggs, looked at him. "Are you staying?" "No build-up, no softening, for now," Darnell said. "What does that mean?" "It means I don't know yet." Monica wrapped both hands around her mug. "Fair." That was the whole conversation. Darnell appreciated more than he could have explained, because it was exactly the right number of words for 6:30 in the morning when nobody had any answers. Vanessa came in with Eli on her hip, barely a temporary arrangement. He was already too big for it, but some mornings apparently required the altitude. She set him down, handed him toast, looked at Darnell. "If you're here today," she said, "the east fence needs fixing. A drain behind the greenhouse is backing up, not a request, not an order, just, here is what the land needs. Take it or leave it. You'll start with the fence," Darnell said. Eli, from his corner, watching this exchange with complete seriousness. Then he looked at Biscuit, stationed by the refrigerator in his morning position of focused optimism. "Biscuit," Eli said. Biscuit's ears went up. "You're on patrol." Darnell looked at Biscuit, looked at Darnell. "He's right," Darnell said. Miss Lorraine made a sound from the stove that she covered quickly. It fooled nobody. The fence took most of the morning. Darnell dug out the soft post, measured back to replacement from the lumber stack in the barn. Different ages, different sources, clearly gathered over years from wherever wood could be found. He set the new post in concrete mixed in a bucket hanging on the barn wall. Worked the wire back up to tension. Moved to the next weak section. Biscuit sat 10 feet away, watching with focused attention. At 9, Eli appeared, binoculars around his neck. A stick he was using as a walking staff. His right hand, one of Miss Lorraine's oven mitts. "I'm ready," Eli said. "For what?" "Patrol." Darnell kept working the wire. "What's your patrol area?" "The perimeter." Darnell had been about to say fence line. Perimeter was a legitimate upgrade. South perimeter first. "Stay where I can see you." Ely lifted the binoculars, scanned south, scanned north, looked at Darnell. "What am I looking for?" "Anything that shouldn't be there." "What should be there?" "Birds. Fence." "Bird?" "What? If there's a person?" "Come tell me." Ely went. For the next hour he moved along the south fence with the seriousness of someone who had been given a real assignment and intended to honor it. Liked 3 times to crouch and examine something on the ground. Once he found a feather, large, brown-tipped, curved. "He brought it back, Hawk," Darnell said without looking up from the wire. They examined the feather again with this new information, then turned and went back to his route. Darnell kept working, and the thing was, it helped. Not Eli specifically. Not the patrol specifically, but just the uncomplicated presence of someone who needed something simple. and was completely satisfied when you gave it to him. Darnell hadn't realized how long it had been since anyone had asked him for something that easy to provide. Clearing the drainage ditch behind the greenhouse that afternoon when he heard a car on the gravel. He straightened up, a dark sedan, clean, well maintained. The kind of vehicle that costs more than it looks like it should. Into the driveway slowly, the speed of someone who knows the property and has been here before. A man got out 50s, heavy through the shoulders, blue suit, shoes that cost more than a week of Darnell's repair work. Walked toward the house with the ease of someone accustomed to arriving places and being welcomed. Vanessa was already on the porch. Darnell set down his tools and walked around the side of the house. The man saw him, smiled, extended his hand. Like Mr. Cooper, I heard you were back in town, Raymond Harris. I've had some interest in this property for a while now, and I thought. Darnell looked at the man's face, and it hit him. Not just the name from the notebook, the face, photograph on the hallway wall. His parents standing in front of the house, his mother mid-law, the man to their right. Heavy through the shoulders, that specific careful smile, exactly this smile. Darnell let him finish. Whatever Harris was saying about market value and tax situations and resources to help resolve quickly, then he said, I'm not selling. Harris's smile adjusted, stayed in place but adjusted. I understand it's a lot to take in. I need an answer today. I'm not selling a beat. Harris looked at the house, then back at Darnell. The smile one more time. You know where to find me. He walked back to his car. Got in, drove away. Darnell watched until the car was gone. Then he stood in the gravel driveway a moment longer, his father's warning sitting in his chest like a stone he'd swallowed. Do not sign anything he gives you. Not anything. He went back to the drainage ditch. The list needed to keep moving. His mind was already somewhere else entirely. That night, Darnell sat at the kitchen table with the notebook open in front of him. 2 lines, heavy ink. His father's hand. Ellie was asleep. Monica was in her room. Rain had gone to the back of the house. From down the hallway came the low sound of the radio playing softly. The late gospel hour. Vanessa stood at the kitchen counter with her back to him, washing out the coffee pot. Not talking, needing to fill the air. After a while, she said without turning around, he's been here before. Darnell looked up Harris. Once, about 8 months ago. Said he was doing research on agricultural land values in the county. Asked if we'd seen any county notices on the property. She set the pot down. We hadn't. He left a card. We didn't call. Did he say anything else? He asked how long we'd been here. He asked if we knew who owned it. She turned around then, looked at Darnell directly. He already knew who owned it. Darnell didn't say anything for a moment. He knew you were coming, Vanessa said. Before you even got here, yeah. She looked at him, at the notebook on the table, at his face, reading something in it. The way certain people learn to read what's happening underneath what's being shown. Years of having to. Years of watching for what was coming before it arrived. What's in the notebook? A warning. My father wrote it. Last entry, different from all the others. His name, a number, and a warning not to sign anything he gives me. Your father knew him. Knew something about him. Vanessa looked at the table. Then she said simply, okay, one word. But the way she said it, flat and forward-facing, like someone already turning toward what comes next, told Darnell that she wasn't going anywhere, that whatever this was, she would stand in it with him, not because she owed him anything, but because this house had been her home for 5 years. And she was done being the kind of person who waited to be told what was happening in her own home. She folded the dish towel over the oven handle, turned off the kitchen light, walked down the hallway. Darnell sat alone at the table. The wood stove ticked softly. Biscuit exhaled from the floor. Outside, the Georgia night was wide and dark, stars coming out over the fields, more of them every minute as the last light drained in from the west. His father's farm, his father's warning, his father's name on a box left under a floor. When you're ready. He hadn't been ready for 10 years. Was here now. He didn't know yet what that meant. But for the first time since Macon, since the parking lot, since he turned the truck south and pointed it toward the one place he'd been circling for a decade, for the first time in all of that, he wasn't thinking about leaving. He was thinking about what needed to happen next. He closed the notebook, put it in his jacket pocket, got up, washed his cup, turned off the last light, walked out to the truck, lay back, looked at the ceiling. Ice gets settled. Tomorrow there was more fence to fix. The drainage ditch behind the greenhouse wasn't finished. The east gate still needed a new hinge. And somewhere in Carver County, Raymond Harris was sleeping with a smile that had been prepared in advance. Darnell looked at the ceiling for a long time. Then, at 5:40 in the morning, before he'd even closed his eyes, he walked out to the gate and found it. A yellow placard, zip-tied to the front gate post, official-looking, printed clean, bold black letters on yellow background. Ownership contested, inquiry pending Avakanki Recurse. He stood in front of it in the cold morning dark, ate once, then he looked closer. No case number, no filing date, no office address, no phone number that would connect to an actual government building. Just the look of legitimacy, without any of the substance underneath it, like a suit with nothing inside it, like a smile prepared in advance, well-made theater, expensive theater, designed to be seen by neighbors, by the people who bought eggs from Monica at the Saturday market on Cedar Street, by anyone driving past Aldine Road who might think twice about whether this was land they wanted to be associated with. Darnell unzipped the zip ties with his pocket knife, took the sign, walked to the truck, set it on the passenger seat. Musket sniffed it once, looked at Darnell. "I know," Darnell said. He started the truck. He backed out of the driveway and pointed it toward town. Raymond Harris wanted to play at legitimacy. It wanted to use paper and process and the appearance of authority to do what money and patience hadn't managed yet. That was fine. But Darnell had spent 8 years learning how to operate in environments where the terrain was designed to work against him. He knew how to read a situation that looked one way on the surface and meant something else underneath. How to find what was hidden. And somewhere in this county, in a file, in a record, in the back of the $2 notebook, his father had already left him everything he needed. He just had to know where to look. The Carver County Municipal Building sat on Main Street, brick 1940s construction. Added onto twice, painted over 3 times. It still looked exactly like what it was, a place where official things happened at official speeds. Waiting area chairs hadn't been replaced since approximately 1987 and showed no signs of being replaced anytime soon. Darnell had called ahead from the truck. Sheriff Harold Reed had said, "Come in." Reed was at his desk when Darnell arrived, right when Darnell came through the door. And here was the thing. He knew who Darnell was before Darnell said his name. Visible in the way Reed looked at him. Recognition with something behind it, not just familiarity, something older, something that had been waiting. "Sit down," Reed said. Darnell sat. Reed was 55, built like someone who had been strong at 30 and kept himself functional without making it a project. Gray at the temples, more gray coming, face shaped by decades of knowing more than he could act on. The weight of a man who has had to sign his name to conclusions he didn't fully believe. Darnell set the fake sign on the desk. Reed looked at it. "I didn't issue this." "Oh, it's not county material. I know that too." Reed set it aside, leaned back, looked at Darnell the way a man looks at something he's been waiting for and isn't entirely glad has finally arrived. Then he said, "I knew your father." A pause. "Ain't run in the same circles much as adults, different lives. But I respected Thomas Cooper." Another pause. He was the kind of man who meant what he said. "I don't meet many of those." Darnell waited. There was more. The more sitting in the room between them. Reed opened the bottom drawer of his desk, took out a manila folder, set it on the desk between them. Didn't open it. "I signed the accident report," Reed said. "Highway 16. 10 years ago. December." The room got quiet in the way rooms get when something important is being laid on a table. "Brake failure," Darnell said. "That's what the report says. Is that what you believe?" Reed didn't answer immediately. He looked at the folder. "A car was serviced 4 days before the accident," he said. "One shop within 30 miles at the time. Carver County Automotive on Route 9. Owner was a man named Deshaun Vickers, good reputation. 11 years in business." He stopped. Vickers sold his stake 8 months after the accident. Relocated to Alabama. I tried to reach him twice in the 2 years after. Neither attempt went anywhere. Darnell looked at the folder. "Who bought Vickers's stake?" Reed looked at him steadily. "I already have a name. I want to hear yours." "Raymond Harris," Reed said. bought 40% of that shop 14 months before the accident. That out 2 years after the fact, going through old business filings on something completely unrelated. By then, Vickers was gone. The shop had changed hands twice more. Physical records long since disposed of in the normal course of business. He let that sit. I couldn't close the accident investigation. Couldn't reopen it either. What I had was a connection that looked wrong, and a chain broken in 3 places. No physical evidence, no witness, nothing that would survive a courtroom, but you kept the file. I kept it. Darnell looked at the manila folder, thought about the notebook in his jacket pocket. Either's handwriting pressed deep into the last page, the name, the number, the warning. What was the $47,000, he said. Reed frowned. Where does that number come from, Darnell told him. The notebook. The last entry, the name and the number and the warning, written heavy enough to press through to the next page. Reed listened without interrupting. Then he was quiet for a long moment. Your father came to see me, he said. About 11 months before the accident. I said someone had approached him about a land development deal in the county. Raymond Harris was brokering it. Said the numbers didn't hold up. He declined, but the approach hadn't stopped. Did he tell you about money Harris owed him? Mentioned a previous arrangement that had gone sour. Didn't give specifics. Said he had documents he was keeping somewhere safe, in case things escalated. A pause. I told him to be careful. That's all I did. I told him to be careful, and I had nothing concrete, and a year later I was signing his accident report. They sat with that, an old regret and a newer one. In the same room, he left a box for me, Darnell said, under the floorboards, name on the outside. The photo, the watch, the notebook. He knew something might happen. He prepared for it. And you weren't here to find it. No. Reed picked up the fake sign, turned it over, set it back down. Harris has been circling this property since your parents died. He knows how to wait, knows how to apply pressure that's hard to trace. He looked at Darnell steadily. He made you an offer yesterday? I said no. He won't stop at no. At fine enough to pressure point. He usually does. Darnell stood, picked up his jacket. Then I need to find the documents my father kept. The ones he mentioned to you. He looked at Reed, attorney who handled the estate after the accident. I found the name in the letters I'd been carrying. Firm closed years ago, but the attorney is still in the county. I called him last night. What did he say? Come in the morning. They have everything ready. Reed stood as well. When you have what you need, come back here first. Before you do anything else, you'll be here. I've been waiting 10 years to have something real to work with. Reed met his eyes. Right going anywhere. Darnell got halfway down the front steps of the municipal building before he stopped. He stood there in the cold morning air, not moving, just standing, looking at the street. The parking lot, ordinary Carver County morning, going about its business on the other side of the building. He pressed one hand flat against the stair railing. 14 months before the accident, Raymond Harris had purchased a 40% stake in the only garage that serviced his parents' car. 4 days before the accident, that car was brought in for service. Months after 2 people died on a road that car had traveled, the garage owner sold everything and left the state. And 19 days after the funeral, 19 days, Harris had filed a purchase intent application on the Cooper property. Darnell pressed his hand harder against the railing. Let it be what it was. Then he walked to the truck, back to the farm in the early afternoon. He didn't go inside right away. He found the post hole digger in the barn where he'd left it, went back to the east fence. The second weak section needed a new post. Same process as yesterday. Dig, layer, mix, set. The work had its own rhythm, physical and plain, the kind of labor that doesn't ask you to feel anything in particular. Just asks you to be present and use your hands. He was grateful for it. I resumed his position 10 feet away, watching with focused attention. At 9, Eli appeared, same equipment as the day before. Binoculars, walking stick, oven mitt on the right hand, and rifle was not present, which Darnell noted was either a tactical decision or a sign of trust. He chose to believe it was both. I'm ready, Eli said. You know the route, south perimeter, then east, then north if time allows. Darnell had said none of those specific words yesterday, but he had implied them, and Eli had apparently constructed a full operational framework from the implication. What are you looking for today? Ely considered this seriously, thing that changed overnight. That was in fact exactly right. Darnell kept his face level. Good. Report back at 10:30. Ely went for the next 90 minutes. Darnell worked and Eli patrolled. It moved along the fence line with a methodical quality that was striking in a 5-year-old. He didn't rush. He stopped when something caught his attention. He crouched down and looked. He stood back up and kept going. At 10:15, back, report Darnell said. Ellie was very serious. 3 things. 1, the gate post on the south end has a crack near the bottom. I think it's been there a while, but it might get worse. He held up 2 fingers. There's a hawk nest in the tall pine on the east corner. I saw the hawk go in twice. 3 fingers. 3. Somebody walked along the outside of the north fence recently. The grass is pushed down in a line. Darnell stopped working. The north fence. They walked it together. Eli was right. The grass on the outside of the fence ran in a direction that didn't match the wind pattern. Flattened, consistent, deliberate. Someone had walked the perimeter of this property. Recently, within the last day or 2, Darnell stood at the fence line and looked out across the neighboring field. Harris had been here, or someone who worked for him, watching, taking measure. Good work, Darnell said. He nodded with the gravity of a man twice his height. Then he looked up at Darnell with something slightly different in his face. Less the patrol officer, more just a boy. Are you going to take our house? The question landed without warning, and direct, the way children ask things, without the buffer adults build around hard questions. Darnell looked at him. No, he said. Balashams? Yes, Ellie considered this for a moment. Then he looked at Biscuit. Biscuit already knew, he said. Wouldn't have surrendered to someone bad. Darnell didn't answer that. Because there was nothing to add to it that would make it better. They walked back to the fence section Darnell was working. Eli resumed his patrol. Darnell worked the wire and thought about a man who walked the outside of fences in the early morning and called it research. Vanessa appeared at noon with 2 plates and said nothing about the fact that she'd made enough for him. Put his plate on the fence post and walked back to the house. He ate standing up, looking at the field, thinking about 11 months and 19 days and a garage on Route 9. That afternoon, while Darnell cleared the drainage ditch behind the greenhouse, Monica came out and sat on an overturned bucket nearby. She had a folder open on her knee, was reading something in it with the focused expression of a person pulling a thread. He didn't explain what she was doing. He didn't ask. But after about 40 minutes she said, without looking up, "Did your father ever mention other families? People Harris approached about the land deal?" Reed said there were others. "Don't give names." "I'm going to the county records office tomorrow," Monica said. "I want to look at the land transaction history for this parcel and the surrounding ones." She looked up then. "Something about that development agreement bothers me. The structure of it. I want to see if there's a pattern. What made you start looking?" She was quiet for a moment. "My foster father," she said. "He lost a piece of land in Alabama when I was 12. Not much, 5 acres. But it was his. Paying on it for 6 years. Then one month he signed something. Someone came to the house, papers, friendly conversation seemed straightforward, and 3 months later the land was gone. He never understood exactly how." Looked back at the folder. "I've been thinking about that for a long time." Darnell went back to the drainage ditch. Monica went back to her folder. The afternoon light moved across the field. They completed 2 more patrol circuits and filed brief reports on each. Miss Lorraine started something on the stove that smelled like slow-cooked onions and made the whole house breathe differently. Biscuit moved from his post by the fence to the back porch, where he could monitor both the field and the kitchen door. It was the most ordinary afternoon Darnell had spent in 10 years. He didn't know what to do with that. He kept working. Anne came back at 3:15. Same vehicle, same careful speed on the gravel, same ease in the way Harris stepped out. The unhurried movement of a man who had never in his life felt like he was somewhere he shouldn't be. Vanessa was on the porch before the car had fully stopped. Darnell was around the side of the barn. He heard the tires on the gravel and came around the corner without hurrying. Harris saw him. The smile appeared on schedule. "Mr. Cooper, I hope I'm not interrupting." "You are," Darnell said. Harris let that sit for a beat, adjusted. "I want to be straightforward with you. I've been interested in this property for several years. The tax situation created a window. I understand that window may be closing now that you're here to address it. But I want to make sure you have all the information before you make a decision. He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket. Darnell watched his hand. I have a formal offer prepared, Harris said. Market rate plus 15%. Given the delinquency and the cost of bringing the property fully current, I think you'll find it's. I said no yesterday, Darnell said. Answer is the same today. Harris held the envelope for a moment, then lowered it. The smile didn't waver. It was the most disciplined smile Darnell had ever seen. Built for exactly this kind of situation. Built for patience. I understand you've been away a long time, Harris said. This land has a lot of history. That can make it hard to think clearly about the practical realities. I'm thinking clearly. The tax liability alone is being resolved. A statutory window, a pause. Harris's eyes shifted slightly. Just slightly, taking in the fence line, the repaired sections. Reading the property the way a man reads an opponent, stating what had changed and what it meant. You've been busy, he said. It's my land. Harris looked at him for a long moment. The smile still there, still working. Behind it had adjusted. The same micro-shift Darnell had seen yesterday. The recalibration of a man who had expected less resistance and was updating his model. The offer stands, Harris said. Leave the paperwork with. Don't leave anything. Harris looked at Vanessa on the porch, then at Darnell, then back at Darnell. All right, he said. You know where to find me. He got back in the sedan, pulled out slowly, the gravel crunching under his tires all the way to the road. Then the sound of the engine fading into the distance, and the ordinary sounds of the farm coming back. Wind, chickens, the creak of the greenhouse plastic in the breeze. Vanessa came down the porch steps. He's testing you, she said. I know, he came back because he thought yesterday was a reaction. Today he wanted to see if you'd hold. Did I hold? She looked at him. You held. They stood in the driveway a moment, either one moving back to what they'd been doing. He's not used to no, Vanessa said. I watched him the first time he came here, 8 months ago. He walked this property like he already owned it, looked at everything, measured things with his eyes. Left, Monica said, that man has already decided how this ends. What did you think? I thought she was right. She looked at the road where the sedan had disappeared, but he wasn't counting on you coming back. Darnell looked at the road too. He's counting on me not coming back for another 10 years, Darnell said. He figured the property would go to auction and he'd be the only serious bidder. Why didn't you? She said it carefully. Not accusatory, not soft, just a straight question. Back sooner. He took a breath. I didn't know how to walk into an empty house, he said. I thought about it every year. I'd get close sometimes, drive into Georgia, tell myself this was the time. Then I'd find a reason to keep moving. And this time? This time the letter said 30 days, he paused. 30 days or it goes to auction. It was the first reason I'd had that didn't leave room for another direction. Vanessa was quiet for a moment. It's not empty, she said. The house looked at her. It wasn't empty when you got here, she said. It hasn't been empty for 5 years. She turned back toward the porch. I don't know if that makes it easier or harder, but I thought you should know that. She went inside. Darnell stood in the driveway for a while longer. The oak tree at the front gate caught the afternoon light the way he remembered it catching light. A particular angle, a particular color, kind of thing you don't notice until you haven't seen it for 10 years, and it's exactly the same. He thought about his father, walking this same driveway, morning after morning, 30 years of it. The same crunch of gravel, the same oak tree, the same fields opening up to the east. His father had prepared a box, had written a warning, had trusted that the right person would eventually find it. He'd trusted the right person would eventually come home. That night, Darnell sat with the notebook again at the kitchen table. Eli was asleep. The house had settled into its evening sounds. Vanessa sat across from him this time, not doing anything in particular, just present in the way she was present. It was different from most people. No performance in it. After a while she said, "What happens if what's in that box isn't enough?" "It might not be," Darnell said, "but my father mentioned documents to the sheriff. I was keeping them somewhere safe. Not here, with someone he trusted. A lawyer? The estate attorney. The firm closed years ago, but the attorney retired in county. I found him in the letters. Called him last night. What did he say? He said, come in the morning. Darnell looked at the notebook. He said he'd have everything ready. Said it like he'd been waiting. Had he? Yeah, Darnell said. I think he had. Left before the valley, woke at 4:40. Sky still fully dark. No grey yet, just stars going hard above the fields the way they go out here, away from town, where nothing competes with them. Darnell had the truck running, and the heater going before anyone in the house stirred. Except he came back inside for the thermos he'd forgotten on the counter, and Vanessa was there, like standing in the kitchen doorway in a flannel shirt and wool socks, holding a travel mug of coffee she'd clearly made while he was outside starting the truck. She held it out. He took it. Their fingers almost touched, almost. But between almost and actually is its own kind of statement. Neither of them addressed it. Savannah, she said, Savannah. Back before dark, before dark. She looked at him for a moment past the point where the exchange required it. Not long enough to be deliberate. Drive careful, she said. He drove careful. The highway south was empty at that hour. Just Darnell and Biscuit and the headlights working through the dark. Aja in early spring before dawn looks like a landscape still deciding what it wants to be. The hills shapeless. The trees just vertical suggestions. The road the only solid, committed thing. Lake's hot. Drank the coffee Vanessa had made and thought about attorney Jeffrey Lewis. He'd found him 4 days ago. 40 minutes of searching on his phone in the cab of the truck after Eli had gone to sleep and the house had gone quiet. O had dissolved years back, but Lewis himself hadn't gone far. Retired attorneys in small states tend not to. They move to quieter offices, take on less. The work becomes more selective, but it doesn't stop. At 8 in the evening, 4, rings then a man's voice. Direct, unhurried. Lewis, my name is Darnell Cooper. Patricia Cooper was my mother. A silence. Not the silence of someone caught off guard, but the silence of someone who has been waiting for a particular thing to happen, and is taking a breath to acknowledge that it has. I wondered when you'd call. Lewis said, she left documents with you. She did. Come in the morning. Everything ready. That was the whole call. Darnell had gone to bed after and slept. Actually slept 3 solid hours, which surprised him the way small graces do when you've stopped expecting them. Now, 2 hours south. Biscuit had his chin on the window frame, ears moving in the air coming through the gap. The city spreading out ahead as the county gave way to the highway. Jeffrey Lewis's office was on the 2nd floor above a hardware store on a side street off Savannah's main corridor. Exterior stairs on the side of the building, a door with frosted glass. Inside, 2 windows, a desk, bookshelves from floor to ceiling, and a coffee maker that had clearly been running without interruption for a significant portion of the decade. Lewis himself was 72. Thin white hair worn close, white eyes sharp in the way of someone who has spent 50 years reading contracts and understanding what the words are actually saying. Underneath the words they appear to be saying. He stood when Darnell came in, looked at him for a moment. Save your father's jaw, he said. And your mother everywhere else. I've heard that, Darnell said. Sit down. Darnell sat. Biscuit settled beside the chair and put his chin on Darnell's boot. Lewis went to the bookshelf. Not a filing cabinet, actual shelf organized by a system only he could read. He found what he needed in under a minute, a red court folder. Thick, held together with a rubber band gone brittle with age. He set it on the desk between them. Mother brought this to me a little over 10 years ago, he said. About 4 months before the accident on Highway 16, Darnell looked at the folder. 4 months. She had been here 4 months before Highway 16. His mother, preparing for something she hoped would never happen. She came alone, Lewis continued. She didn't tell your father she was coming, which she mentioned and which I noted. He paused. She said there were things she needed in safekeeping with someone she trusted. She trusted me because I'd handled a previous matter for your family. A boundary dispute with a neighboring property some years earlier. Minor, but she remembered. Looked at Darnell evenly. She also said that if anything happened to her or your father before she came back for the documents, I was to hold everything until you came for it. A pause. She said that specifically. She said, "Bite it to bit. He'll come when he's ready." Another pause. It took some time. It did. She said that too. That it would take time, no judgment in it, just the fact of it laid flat. She knew you, Lewis said. Darnell looked at the folder, opened it slowly. His mother had been a teacher for 28 years. She knew how to create order for a specific reader. They knew how to arrange information so that someone coming to it without any prior knowledge could follow from beginning to end and arrive at understanding. Rather than confusion, she had prepared this for a specific reader. Had prepared it for him. The original property deed, the land transfer documents from when his parents purchased the farm. Clean, complete. His parents' signatures legible. The county stamp intact. No ambiguity, no gap that a patient man with resources could wedge open. His father's will, properly drawn, properly witnessed. Everything to Darnell, with one provision. The farmhouse was not to be sold within the first 5 years of inheritance. It was to be maintained as a family home during that period. The 5-year restriction had lapsed. Darnell was a decade past it. But the will itself was valid and the ownership was unambiguous. Then the other documents, a promissory note, dated 14 years ago, signed by Raymond Harris, acknowledging a personal debt of $47,000 owed to Thomas Cooper, repayable within 3 years. Attached to it, a letter from Harris requesting an extension on repayment, dated 13 years ago. Letter 12 years ago. Another extension requested, and finally, a letter from his father, formal, brief, dated 13 months before the accident, stating that no further extensions would be granted, but the matter would be referred to legal counsel within 60 days if payment was not received. 60 days, 13 months before Highway 16. Darnell set the promissory note down, picked up the next document, a land development agreement, 16 years ago. Harris's holding company, operating under a name Darnell didn't recognize, had been brokering a development scheme in Carver County, a proposal to build mixed residential and commercial property on agricultural land. Multiple landowners approached. Thomas Cooper had been one of them. The agreement would have transferred partial development rights to Harris's company, in exchange for a promised share of future profits, projected to be substantial. Father had refused to sign. Darnell read the agreement carefully, all of it, then read it again, the profit-sharing clause, the thresholds, the definitions nested inside definitions, like conditions written to appear reasonable on a first read and become impossible on a third. This is what Monica saw, he thought. This is what she was looking for. The language was built to create confusion, not clarity. Terms defined in one section in ways that undermined their meaning in another. Revenue thresholds written with modifiers that ensured they could never be met, not through obvious fraud, but through structure. The patience of someone who knew that most people don't read contracts 3 times. Most people trust that the words mean what they appear to mean. His father had read it 3 times, had seen it, had refused, gone back to Harris about the $47,000. Had made a final demand, pay what you owe in 60 days or face legal action, a man with a fraudulent scheme in progress, a creditor threatening to drag him into court, 13 months later. Highway 16. December. Black ice. Darnell set the documents down. The room was quiet except for the coffee maker doing something thermal in the corner. She knew, Darnell said. She figured it out. She went through the development agreement line by line, Lois said, the language back. Then she found the loan records and understood what the demand letter meant in context. A pause. She was planning to bring everything to the county attorney, to me to make sure the documents survived. In case something happened before she got there. Something happened before she got there. 4 months between when she came to me and the accident. Yes, looked at the documents on the desk. Everything his father had tried to protect by refusing to sign. Everything his mother had quietly, carefully assembled and carried to a man she barely knew but trusted completely. Left here. For him, ever he found his way back. Already made copies, Lewis said. The first set 5 years ago, when it seemed like you might not come. Then again last year, keeping things current. Darnell looked at the man. Thank you. Lewis waved it off. Gesture of someone who doesn't want thanks for doing what was simply right and long overdue. One more thing, Lewis said. He opened the center drawer of his desk. Took out a small envelope, white, sealed. Darnell's name on the front. In his mother's handwriting. That particular forward tilt. The way she crossed her T's with a slight leftward hook she'd never corrected because she didn't think it needed correcting. Left this separately from the documents, Lewis said. Said it was personal, said I'd know when to give it to you. He set the envelope on top of the folder. I think this is when Darnell picked up the folder and the envelope, shook Lewis's hand. A father was a man who did the right thing when it cost him something, Lewis said. That's rarer than it should be. Darnell shook the hand. Didn't answer that. Some things you can't answer without your voice. Doing something you don't want it to do in front of a man you've just met. He walked out. Sat in the truck for 10 minutes before he started it. Biscuit put his chin on Darnell's arm. Bevel opened the envelope, 3 sentences. His mother had never used more words than something required. You think leaving was wrong? It wasn't. Coming back is right. Those are different things. House is big enough for more than just memory. Fill it. I love you, Mom. He read it twice. Then he pressed the letter flat against the steering wheel. Both hands held it there for a moment. Let the moment be what it was. Just a man in a truck holding a letter his mother wrote more than 10 years ago in a second-floor office in Savannah. Because she loved her son enough to prepare for the worst. Gave him something soft to land on when he finally got there. He folded the letter carefully, put it inside his jacket against his chest, started the truck. He was pulling out of the parking space onto the street when his phone rang. Monica picked up on the first ring. Tell me, he said. No greeting from her either. Straight to it. Key title action, she said. This morning, while you were in Savannah, he's claiming ownership is disputed and requesting a court-ordered review. Her voice was controlled and flat, the way it got when she was managing something much larger than she wanted to show. If it goes unchallenged, it freezes any ownership confirmation and ties the property in process for months. Long enough for him to find another angle, Darnell merged onto the northbound highway. He filed this morning because he knew you'd left. Someone's been watching the gate, Monica said. He waited for the truck to be gone. Long ago did it come through. About an hour. I found it when I logged into the county portal to check something else. I have the deed, Darnell said. The original and the will and the promissory note and the development scheme. The whole picture. A silence, a different kind of silence than before. The silence of someone who has been calculating variables all day and has just received the one that changes the equation. All of it. Monica said all of it. With the original deed on the record, the quiet title has due basis. Her voice shifted slightly, still controlled but with something underneath it now. It dies at preliminary review if the ownership chain is clear. I know. Owing to Reed now. He can have the county attorney file a response today. Deed and will as exhibits. When's the preliminary review? I don't know yet. Reed will know. A pause. Keep pulling the records, Darnell said. Save on all 14 families. Already done. I have 12 transactions fully documented. Still, working on the last 2. Have it ready. A breath on the other end. Then, drive careful. She ended the call. Darnell drove north. Avally opened up on both sides. The hills he'd grown up looking at. The angle of mid-morning light on the western ridge that he'd seen 10,000 times before he was old enough to know he was memorizing it. Faced about Harris watching the driveway, waiting for the truck to disappear. The same patients his father had identified 13 months before the accident and tried to address through proper channels. Same patients that had moved on the property 19 days after a funeral. The same patients that had waited 10 years for a son who never came home, and then moved again the moment that son showed up and said no. Manel pressed the accelerator down another degree. Reed's office was 40 minutes north. Liked both folders on Reed's desk and sat down. Reed opened the primary folder. Reed without speaking. His face stayed level, the composure of someone who has trained himself to receive information before responding to it. His jaw tightened when he reached the promissory note. A small tension at the hinge. There and gone. It came back when he reached the development agreement. He read that one twice, then he set everything down and was quiet. 14 families. Monica Carter found them. She's been at the county records office for 2 days. She may have more before tonight. Reed looked at the promissory note again. The date, the amount. Extension letters ending in Thomas Cooper's final demand. 13 months and the break service was 4 days before. He looked up at Darnell. He knew you were going to find this eventually. Once you showed up, I didn't take the offer. He knew the clock was running. So he filed first this morning while I was in Savannah, QET title action. Court-ordered review. Reed picked up the fake sign from the corner of his desk, looked at it briefly, set it back down. With the original deed on the record, the quiet title action has no basis. He either didn't know you had it, or he was betting you didn't know what to do with it. What's the timeline? Preliminary review, I can find out in the next hour. But with this, he touched the deed. I'll have the county attorney file a response today. Deed and will as exhibits. The review becomes a formality. He paused. A fraud investigation is a longer road. Opening an investigation, pulling the old accident records. That takes time. Process, cooperation from the state. He looked at Darnell steadily. It starts with what you've brought me today. This is real material, not a feeling, not a broken chain. Darnell nodded. He'll know, Reed said. Respond to the filing. When the deed lands in the county record, he'll understand what you've got. He may do something reactive. Reactive would be better than patient, Darnell said. Patient is what he's been for 15 years. Almost smiled. The corner of his mouth moved. He slid the second accordion folder across the desk. I'll have the response filed before 5. Darnell was halfway back to the truck. Wesney's phone rang again. Monica, first ring. At the records office, she said. I found something else. Tell me it's not 14 families. A pause, not dramatic. The pause of someone who has been staring at numbers all afternoon and needs a breath before saying the last ones. It's 17, she said, going back 22 years. 5 of them lost their properties entirely, not just equity, everything. 2 more are still carrying debt they can't trace the origin of. She stopped. If all 17 transactions run through the same entity, different names, same principles. Darnell stood beside the truck with his hand on the door handle. 17, he said. 22 years, Darnell. Her voice shifted. Still controlled, but the flatness had something in it now, not quite emotion. The moment when someone who processes everything through analysis arrives at something the analysis can't fully contain. This started before we were born. Aid to your parents. It wasn't the first time. It wasn't close to the first time. The parking lot outside Reed's office. A quiet Wednesday afternoon in Carver County. A thing going about its ordinary business on the other side of the lot. Come home when you're done, Darnell said. Before dark, she said. She ended the call. Darnell stood there another moment. 17 families. 22 years of the same scheme. The same patience. The same language built to take from people who trusted that what they were signing meant what it appeared to mean. His father had seen it. Had refused. It tried to address it through proper channels. With a demand letter and an expectation that the system would work if you gave it the right materials. His mother had gone further, had assembled the evidence, had driven to Savannah alone, left everything with a man she trusted, because she understood that careful wasn't always enough. That sometimes what was coming at you had patience and resources and time. The only answer to that was to prepare something that could outlast you if it needed to. Darnell got in the truck, drove north toward the farm. The afternoon had gone gold, fields on both sides catching the low light. Particular quality of late-day Georgia sun in early spring, soft and slanted, making ordinary things look like they're worth looking at. He thought about Monica sitting in a county records office for 2 days pulling transaction histories. Asked, not announced. Just doing the work because she had seen what this kind of paper fraud could do to a person. Had watched it happen to someone she loved when she was 12 years old, and she understood in her bones what it meant, before she had all the documents to confirm it. He thought about Vanessa, who had walked out of a bad situation in November, with nothing but her sister and a baby coming, had found this broken-down farmhouse on a road she'd never driven before, and had decided, without anyone asking her to, that it was worth saving, had fixed the roof, had planted the garden, had built the coop, had kept the place alive for 5 years, while its rightful owner was somewhere else, unable to make himself come back. He thought about Miss Lorraine, who had shown up with a casserole and stayed because someone needed to be there, had sat with a woman in labor in a farmhouse with no hospital nearby, and had been exactly what was needed and had asked for nothing in return. Kate thought about Eli with his wooden rifle, and his red nail polish, and his oven mitt and his binoculars, holding the south perimeter while the adults figured out what came next. He thought about his father, at a kitchen table in this same house, pressing a pen hard into the back page of a $2 notebook, writing 2 lines that needed to survive whatever was coming, writing them heavy enough that they'd press through to the next page, writing them for a son he wasn't sure would ever be ready, but trusted would eventually come. He thought about his mother, driving to Savannah alone, not telling Thomas where she was going, right across from Jeffrey Lewis, and laying it all out, the documents, the timeline, the things she'd understood that her husband hadn't fully understood yet. Saying, "Hold this for Darnell, he'll come when he's ready." Like 4 months before Highway 16, she had prepared for the worst, and she had left him something to come home to. The farm came into view as he turned onto Aldine Road, smoke from the chimney, chickens in the yard, main house warm behind the house. The oak tree at the driveway entrance catching the last of the afternoon light. Vanessa was on the porch when he pulled in. She stood at the top of the steps with her arms at her sides, not crossed, reaching for anything. The same way she'd stood the first morning, holding her ground without making a production of it. He got out of the truck. "Det you get it?" she said. "All of it. Deed, will, the debt, the development fraud, whole picture?" "Yes," she let out one breath. Short, sharp, the kind that comes after you've been holding something since 4:40 in the morning and finally the reason to hold it is gone. "Reed is filing the response today," he said. "Summary review is Thursday. The quiet title action dies at review with the deed on the record, and after, the fraud investigation is a longer road." He came up the porch steps. "But it opens. Monica has 17 families, 22 years. Is taking it to the state." Vanessa held his eyes for a moment, then she turned back toward the kitchen. "Dinner in 20 minutes, she said. Which was exactly the right response. Not a celebration, not a long discussion about what it all meant. Like just, we keep moving, we eat, we do the next thing. Miss Lorraine appeared from the hallway. Looked at Darnell's face once. "Good," she said then. "Eli has been on support patrol since 7 this morning. It's something near the south fence he's classified as significant. He's been waiting very patiently to brief you." Darnell looked at the ceiling briefly. "Tell him I'll debrief in 10 minutes. He'll want it in 5. Tell him 10. Lorraine walked back down the hallway. 10 minutes, she called, muffled but perfectly clear, from somewhere in the back of the house, also muffled but perfectly clear. "Fine. But it's very significant, the significant finding, it turned out, large beetle, which Eli had named Sergeant." "Sergeant is staying outside," Darnell said. "Obviously," Eli said, slightly offended that this needed saying. That evening they paid the taxes. A practical thing. An online transaction, they filled out, a payment submitted, a confirmation number appearing on a screen, bureaucratic, unremarkable. Except the balance had been sitting there for 10 years, growing patient in its own way, waiting for someone to come back and deal with it. And now Monica typed in the payment information and paused with her fingers on the keyboard and looked at Vanessa. Vanessa looked at Darnell. Darnell nodded. Monica submitted. The confirmation appeared on the screen. Payment received. Balance cleared. Account current. The 3 of them looked at it for a moment. Ray came in from the back hallway in his socks, having apparently been listening from around the corner with the subtlety of a 5-year-old, which is to say none at all. He looked at the laptop screen, looked at his mother, looked at Darnell, looked at the screen again. He climbed onto his chair, stood up on it. "We won the tax battle," he announced, and Miss Lorraine's, who had appeared in the kitchen doorway with a dish towel, burst out laughing. Not a small laugh, a polite, contained laugh. The real version, the kind that takes over your whole body and makes you need to find something to hold on to. She reached for the counter and then simply decided the floor was fine and sat down on it, back against the cabinets, laughing in a way that had clearly been building for a while, maybe for 5 years, maybe longer, which made Monica laugh, which came out of her face in a way that visibly surprised even Monica. She covered her mouth, up covering it. "Let it happen." Vanessa pressed both hands over her face. Her shoulders were shaking. Biscuit stood up from his spot by the refrigerator, looked at each person in the room in sequence, decided this was acceptable, sat back down. Elle stood in the doorway, Miss Lorraine on the kitchen floor, laughing. Monica with tears tracking down her face, trying to explain to a confused Eli why the tax battle was funny. Which it wasn't exactly, except that it was. Vanessa with both hands still over her face, her whole body shaking with something that had been held in for 30 days, or possibly much longer than that. His father's house, his mother's kitchen. People his mother had somehow known, without knowing their names or their story, would come. Had told him to look at before he decided anything. He pressed the back of his hand against his mouth, breathed once, let it stay and let it move at the same time. Both were allowed, Ellie, he said. Ellie looked down at him from the chair, completely serious about the tax battle. Good call, Darnell said. Ellie nodded. I know. Lorraine started laughing again from the floor. Outside, the Georgia night was doing what it does, wide and dark and full of stars. The south fence line holding straight, the greenhouse warm behind the house. 17 families in Carver County across 22 years. A fraud investigation opening in the morning. A man named Raymond Harris sleeping somewhere in this county with a careful smile that had finally met something it couldn't adjust its way around. And inside this particular kitchen on this particular road in Carver County, Georgia, a woman sitting on the floor laughing until she needed the wall. A girl who processed the world through patterns, finally letting something through that the patterns couldn't contain. A mother with both hands over her face, shaking with 5 years of held breath finally released. A boy standing on a chair who had declared victory over the tax battle. A dog who had decided this was acceptable. And Darnell Cooper, 38 years old, 10 years gone, standing in the doorway of the house he grew up in, not thinking about leaving, not yet thinking about staying, just standing there, present for the first time in a very long time, just present, and for right now, in this kitchen, like this particular sound filling this particular house on this cold Georgia night. That was enough. Nobody slept much. Not really. Darnell lay on the cot in the back room and looked at the ceiling and listened to the house settle around him, the wood stove ticking down, the wind coming low across the south field, Musket breathing slow and even on the floor beside him. Tomorrow, preliminary review at 9. He'd been in rooms like that before. Not courtrooms exactly, but rooms where something official was being decided and the outcome depended on what you walked in with. He knew how to sit still in those rooms, knew how to keep his face from doing things he didn't want it to do, how to wait. What he didn't know was how to sit still with this particular thing. Because this wasn't a mission briefing, this wasn't a debrief after something that had gone wrong in a way that had a name and a report number and a chain of command to absorb it. This was his parents. This was Highway 16 in December. Bates was a man who had been patient for 22 years and had nearly won. Because the one person who was supposed to come home had spent 10 years not coming, Darnell pressed the back of his hand against his mouth. Let it move through. Lowered breathe. Just let it move. He lowered his hand, looked at the ceiling, thought about his father at a kitchen table somewhere in this house, writing a final demand letter to a man who owed him money and meant him harm. Writing it carefully, trusting that doing the right thing through proper channels would be enough. And his mother, driving to Savannah alone, not telling Thomas, sitting across from Jeffrey Lewis in that second-floor office and laying everything on the table, saying, hold this for my son, he'll come when he's ready. 4 months before Highway 16, she had prepared for the worst, and she had left him something to land on. He picked up the notebook from the windowsill, held it, didn't open it, just held it. Outside through the window, the Georgia night was doing what it does, wide and dark and full of stars. The south fence line he'd repaired, invisible in the dark, but there, holding straight. Greenhouse warm between its layers of plastic. The chickens quiet in their coop, his father's land, his mother's kitchen, a boy named Eli sleeping in the next room, with a beetle named Sergeant relocated to the oak tree outside. Knifed 2 women who had kept this place alive, life of lives with salvage lumber and stubbornness. A retired schoolteacher who had sat on the kitchen floor and laughed until she needed the wall. Darnell set the notebook back on the windowsill, closed his eyes, didn't sleep for another hour, but eventually, morning came. Hard and fast the way important mornings do. No gentle build-up, Just dark, and then the alarm on his phone at 5:15. Biscuit already on his feet with an expression that communicated clearly that today was not a regular day and he knew it and was ready. Darnell showered, dressed, jacket, the one with the notebook in the inside pocket, father's watch on his wrist, crystal cracked in one corner, leather strap repaired with electrical tape because the tape worked fine. He came to the kitchen at 6. Vanessa was already there. Of course she was. Coffee going. Eggs in the pan. I was wearing a dark blue sweater he hadn't seen before. Hair down. She moved through the kitchen without wasted motion, just getting things done because they needed doing. She didn't say good morning. She handed him a plate. He sat down. Anka appeared from the hallway. Folder under her arm, already dressed, hair pulled back. She sat across from Darnell, opened the folder, slid a single sheet toward him. 17 families, she said. Fully documented. Every transaction, a property, every name. She tapped the bottom of the page. County Attorney Angela Young has already received the preliminary package from Reed. She reviewed it last night. You spoke to her? Reed called me at 9 to confirm. Looked at him steadily. She's been the county attorney for 11 years. She knows what she's looking at. She's seen land fraud before. Not at this scale. A pause. She knows exactly what she's looking at. Lorraine came in from the back hallway with Eli on her heels. Still in his pajamas, oven mitt already on one hand. I'm ready, Eli announced. Everyone looked at him for what? Vanessa said support patrol. During the hearing, not going to the hearing, Eli processed this. Then, I'll hold down the farm. That would be very helpful, Darnell said. Eli nodded. Accepted the assignment with the gravity it deserved. Miss Lorraine caught Darnell's eye over Eli's head. Look of hers. The one she'd been giving rooms for 31 years of teaching second grade, the one that saw everything and chose carefully what to address. She gave him a small nod. Just that. Go. You're ready. We've got things here. El finished his coffee, stood up, picked up his jacket. Vanessa walked him to the door. Not to the truck, just to the door. Whatever happens in there, she said, then stopped. No, listen. She looked at him straight. Not the careful measuring look she'd been using since he has arrived. Straight at him. Whatever happens in there, you came back. You found it. You did every part of this that needed doing. She paused. Your parents did the work first. Came back to finish it. That's not nothing. Darnell looked at her for a moment. She wasn't asking him to say anything. She'd said what she needed to say. Now she was just there. Standing in the doorway of the house she'd kept alive for 5 years, in the early morning cold, in a dark blue sweater. I'll be back before dark, he said. I know you will. He walked to the truck. The Carver County Courthouse was 3 buildings east of Reed's office on the same street brick, 1930s construction. Steps worn smooth in the center from decades of feet. Lobby that smelled like old carpet, and the particular patience of a place where official things happen at official speeds. Reed was already inside when Darnell arrived. He stood when Darnell came through the door. A nod. The nod of a man who has done what he said he would do and is ready for whatever comes next. County Attorney Angela Young was at the table, files open, faces organized in the way of someone who had reviewed everything the previous evening and arrived this morning with a complete picture and a clear plan. She was 43, kind of professional composure that doesn't perform itself. It's just there like a load-bearing wall. You only notice it when you lean against it and it holds. She looked at Darnell when he sat down. Mr. Cooper laid the full document package. A pause. I want you to know what we're walking in with. The original deed and will establish unambiguous ownership, no gaps in the chain. The promissory note and demand letter establish motive. Development agreement establishes a pattern. She folded her hands on the table, together. The quiet title action has no legal basis, and the judge will see that in approximately the first 10 minutes. And after that? After that, out carefully, we're in a different conversation. One that takes longer but one that starts today. Darnell nodded, then Raymond Harris walked in bluesy suit. Dark slacks, those shoes. First, he came through the door with his attorney, a younger man, mid-30s, who carried his briefcase with the careful confidence of someone who had been told this morning was straightforward and had believed it. Harris took his seat on the other side of the table, set his hands flat on the surface, composed, unhurried. the posture of a man who had been in rooms like this before and knew how to appear like he belonged in them. The smile still there, working harder than it had in Darnell's driveway. The effort showing at the edges in a way it hadn't that day. Because that day, Harris had held all the information. He'd known about the tax delinquency. The son had been gone 10 years. He'd calculated that the documents from an estate handled by a firm now long dissolved would be slow to surface, if they surfaced at all. He'd been betting on bureaucratic friction. They'd been betting on absence. He'd been wrong about what Darnell had been doing in Savannah. The judge entered at 8:59. She was in her early 60s, silver locks pinned back, reading glasses on a chain, had the manner of someone who had seen most things courts produce, and had developed over the years a precise and unforgiving ability to tell the difference between a legitimate dispute and a manufactured one. She sat, looked at the room, on a quiet title action filed by the Harris Land Group, claiming disputed ownership of parcel 7703. Aldine Road, Carver County. She opened the file in front of her. Safes Young, you filed a response on behalf of the recorded title holder. Yes, Your Honor. With exhibits, Young stood, placed the documents on the bench, the original deed, the will, documentation of unbroken ownership from original purchase to the present day. The tax delinquency, she noted, was in the process of being resolved within the 30-day statutory window. The judge read without speaking, asked two procedural questions, both directed at Young, both answered in under 30 seconds. Then she looked at Harris's attorney. Counsel. Harris's attorney leaned slightly forward. Your Honor, I wish to withdraw the action pending further review of the presented. I'll make that determination, the judge said. She went back to the documents. The room was quiet. Harris's hands were flat on the table. Darnell watched them. 1 minute, 3-4 minutes. Then the judge looked up. The quiet title action filed by the Harris Land Group is dismissed. She set her pen down. Ownership of parcel 7703 Aldine Road is confirmed as Darnell Thomas Cooper, uncontested. Looked at Young. Ms. Young, I understand there are additional matters pertaining to historical land transactions in Carver County currently under review. Yes, Your Honor. We anticipate further filings in the coming weeks. Judge nodded once. I'll look forward to them. She rose. The room began to move. Young gathered her files. Reed caught Darnell's eye across the table, a look that carried more than any summary could. And then Darnell looked at Harris. He needed to see it. Harris was looking at the deed, the original, lying on the table where Young had placed it as an exhibit, his parents' signatures at the bottom, his mother's handwriting, that forward tilt, left hook on the T's she never corrected, his father's more deliberate printing, the careful letters of a man who had taught himself to write clearly. 2 signatures on a piece of paper, everything Harris had been working around for 10 years. Darnell watched him look at it, and he saw the precise moment, the moment when the calculation completed. When Harris understood not just that today was lost, but that the position he'd been building for 22 years had been systematically taken apart by a chain of careful people, a father who refused to sign, a mother who kept records, an attorney who kept faith, a son who finally came home. No dramatic reaction, no raised voice. Just a man sitting very still while something internal reorganized itself into a shape he hadn't planned for. The smile was gone, completely gone. What was left in its place was just a face. An ordinary middle-aged face, no longer performing anything, no longer needing to. Darnell picked up the deed, held it for a moment, slid it back into the folder. He didn't say anything, something to say that the deed hadn't already said better. He walked out of the courthouse into the morning light, sat on the front steps for a moment. Just sat. The street in front of him. Cars going by. Ordinary Thursday morning in Carver County going about its business like it always had. He pressed one hand flat against his knee, breathed once, then he stood up, called Reed. 1 ring. It's done, Darnell said. I know. Young called me from the parking lot. A pause. The particular quiet of a man setting something down he's been carrying a long time. The fraud investigation opens formally this afternoon. I spoke with the state's office this morning. Linked everything. Monica has the full package, 17 transactions, all documented good. She can bring it to Young directly. I'll let her decide. She put it together. That's fair. Reed was quiet for a moment. The other kept records because he believed someone would eventually use them. Your mother made sure they'd survive long enough. A pause. Both of them did their part. Darnell looked at the road ahead, the turn onto Aldine Road visible from here. Staying? Reed asked. 4 words. Simple. Darnell looked at the fence line visible from the street. The new post, still pale wood against the weathered gray of the others. The oak tree at the driveway entrance, bare-branched in the early spring cold, but undeniably alive. Root system going deep into ground his family had owned for 26 years. Yeah, he said. Reed said good and hung up. They stopped at the diner on Cedar Street on the way back. He hadn't planned to. But he'd been thinking about the name at the bottom of Monica's list since the night she'd spread those papers across the kitchen table. The diner was right there on the main street, and he had Jeffrey Lewis's card in his jacket pocket, and some things you just do them. The diner was half full at mid-morning, the kind of place that never fully empties, always going. Pie under a glass dome on the counter. A television in the corner showing the morning news with the sound turned low. A woman came out of the kitchen carrying 2 plates, 52, medium height. Natural hair gone mostly silver, oaked with the economy of someone who has been on her feet for long shifts for many years and has found a way to get everything done without wasting anything. She set the plates down at a corner table, turned, saw Darnell. People see strangers in small towns, a quick professional read, not impolite, just the assessment that says not from here or haven't seen you before. She came to the counter. What can I get you? Coffee, Darnell said. Hey, Brenda Wright. She went still. Not alarmed, not defensive, just still. The stillness of someone who has had their name said in unexpected places before and has learned to wait before reacting. Who's asking? My name is Darnell Cooper. Clients were Thomas and Patricia Cooper. They owned the farm on Aldine Road. I know that farm, she said quietly. I know you do, and I know your family had land in this county. He paused. I know you lost it. Looked at him for a long moment. Then she poured the coffee without being asked, set it in front of him, stood on her side of the counter with both hands flat on the surface. 8 years ago, she said, I made every payment, every single one. Her voice was steady, the steadiness of someone who has said this before, said it to herself, said it to the bank, said it to anyone who would listen, and stopped being believed after a while. The development revenue they promised, it never came. Then the bank said I was in default, and I didn't understand how, and I couldn't afford an attorney to find out, and by the time I understood what had happened, there wasn't anything left to fight for. There might be now, Darnell said. Lewis's card out of his jacket pocket. Set it on the counter between them. This is an attorney named Jeffrey Lewis. He's in Savannah. He's been holding documents related to the development scheme that cost you your land, waiting for the right time to use them. He looked at her. The fraud investigation opened this morning, officially. The county attorney has the full package. 17 families. 22 years. Brenda looked at the card. Her hands on the counter were steady, but her jaw was working through something. The movement of a person who has kept a particular feeling folded up very small for 8 years, and is in the presence of the first moment it has anywhere to go. 17 families, she said. 17. She picked up the card, held it. Didn't look at Darnell when she spoke next. She said, What happened to them? We're working on that too. She nodded, looked at the card one more time, looked at him. And what was in her face wasn't exactly gratitude. It was something older and more complicated than gratitude. The expression of someone who has been told for 8 years, by circumstances, by outcomes, a silence of a system that moved on without her, that what happened to her didn't matter enough to address, and has just been told otherwise. Thank you, she said. Call him, Darnell said. He left the coffee money on the counter, looked out into the mid-morning light. He stood on the sidewalk for a moment, not moving, just standing, the ordinary Thursday morning that had turned into something else. 17 families. 22 years. A father had tried to stop it the right way. His mother had prepared the evidence to stop it after he couldn't. And now a woman named Brenda Wright was standing behind a diner counter holding a business card. Somewhere, a state investigation was opening files on a man who had been patient for 2 decades and had finally run out of time. Darnell walked to the truck, got in, drove north toward home. Back at the farm by noon, came through the front door. Vanessa appeared from the kitchen, dish towel over her shoulder. Reading his face in approximately 1 second, he said. Dismissed. Ownership confirmed. She let out one breath. Short, but sharp. The kind that comes after you've been holding something since 4:40 in the morning, and finally the reason to hold it is gone. Reed is filing the fraud investigation this afternoon. The state wants the full package, Monica. Bring it to Young directly. She put it together. She should be the one. Monica was already at the kitchen table, laptop open, folder organized and labeled beside it. She looked up at Darnell. 17 families, she said. I know, they're right. I stopped at the diner. I gave her Lewis's card. Monica was quiet for a moment. Then your mother saved the materials. You built the case. She considered that, accepted it, turned back to her laptop. Rain appeared from the hallway. One look at the room. Good, she said then. Eli has been on support patrol since 7 this morning. Found something near the south fence he's classified as significant, and he's been waiting very patiently to brief you. Darnell looked at the ceiling briefly. Tell him I'll debrief in 10 minutes. He'll want it in 5. Tell him 10. Lorraine walked back down the hallway. 10 minutes, she called. From somewhere in the back of the house, muffled but perfectly clear. Fine, but it's very significant. The significant finding was a large beetle, which Eli had named Sergeant. Sergeant is staying outside, Darnell said. Obviously, Eli said. Slightly offended that this needed saying. That evening they ate outside. Miss Lorraine had pushed for it, and nobody had the energy to argue. And it turned out, as it generally did when Miss Lorraine pushed for something, that she was right. 3 extra trips for chairs, a folding table from the barn, 2 wooden crates serving as overflow surface. The result was structurally improbable and entirely comfortable. The backfield at dusk, the sky doing its evening sequence, orange, then rose, then the deep blue that comes just before the stars, cornbread, a pot of slow-cooked beans, a fire pit going more for the company of it than the warmth. Though the warmth didn't hurt, Ellie updated Darnell on the afternoon patrol in full detail. 2 hawks over the east field, 11 suspicious pile of rocks near the drainage ditch that turned out upon investigation to be a regular pile of rocks, and Sergeant the Beetle, relocated to the base of the oak tree and thriving in his new position. Sergeant is a good name, Lane said. Eli considered this. He earned it. After the dishes were cleared, Eli arranged himself in Miss Lorraine's lap with the bird book across both of them, and was asleep before the 3rd page. Miss Lorraine looked down at him. Lane out at the field didn't move. Monica was inside already, laptop open, working on the next thing. Because Monica didn't stop, that was simply who she was, and it was exactly right for who she was. Left Darnell and Vanessa at the porch railing. Not arranged there, just both arriving at the same place at the same time, because there was nowhere else that made more sense. The field in front of them, the tree line at the far end going dark, the first stars coming out over the eastern ridge. They stood there for a while without speaking. It was the kind of silence that doesn't need to be filled. The kind that has its own weight and its own shape and means something on its own. The north room, Darnell said finally. Vanessa looked at him. It hasn't been used since I got here. Needs work, new subfloor in the corner, window resealed. But it's a room, she waited. My mother's letter said fill the house. He looked at the field. I've been thinking about what that actually means. Not abstractly, concretely. What does it mean? He paused. It means a room for someone who needs it, not a shelter, not a program. A real place for a while. For someone who's run out of road. Other pause. The way you ran out of road. Vanessa was quiet for a moment. Miss Lorraine would want to help with that, she said. Monica would set up a system, rules, intake. She'd say it was for practical reasons. She'd be right that it needs rules. A corner of her mouth moved. Ely would give everyone a patrol assignment, and you'd fix whatever was broken. That's the part I know how to do. She was looking at the field, looked at the greenhouse when she was working out what it needed. Not just seeing what was there, seeing what it could hold. Okay, she said. Just that. 2 letters. The weight in them. The weight of something decided between 2 people who had stopped needing ceremony to make things real. Darnell turned toward her slightly. Not much. Enough. I didn't come here for this, he said. I know. Aim because you had no other direction, that's usually how it works. You think I turned up Aldine Road on purpose? Her voice was quiet. I was 23 years old. It was November. I needed somewhere to park. That was all I was doing. It's about that. 23 years old. Monica's car. November in Georgia. Cold drama, not apologizing for it. Driving up a road she'd never been on. Finding a farmhouse with every window dark. Staying because staying was the only move left. My mother knew someone would come, he said. She knew this house had room for it. She knew more than that. He looked at the field. She wrote it in the letter. Find someone already there. Look at them before you decide anything. Vanessa was quiet. I looked, he said. She turned toward him. The same small degree. Enough, I know you did, she said. He looked at her, like the careful measuring look he'd been using since he arrived. Not the sideways kind with distance built into it. Straight at her, the way you look at someone when you've stopped calculating the gap. I'm staying, he said, present tense. A decision announced. A fact reported to someone who had earned the reporting. She held his eyes. I know, she said. And didn't move away from where she was standing, and he didn't move away from where he was standing. The field was dark and wide in front of them, and the stars were coming out one by one over the eastern ridge. And the house behind them was warm and full and making its small sounds. That was it. That was the whole of it. No ceremony, like no announcement. Just two people standing at the railing of a farmhouse porch in Georgia in early spring, having arrived here by completely different roads, and deciding without making a production of it that this was where the road ended. That the ending was fine. More than fine. Inside, Miss Lorraine turned a page. Eli shifted in her lap, still deeply asleep, and said something that might have been Caterpillar. Miss Lorraine looked down at him, 68 years old. They had thought, when the classroom was gone, when her brother was gone, when the apartment was gone, that she was at the end of the useful portion of her life. Not dramatically, just in this quiet way that comes when the shape of your days loses its form and you can't reconstruct it from what remains. She had come here because Vanessa had offered a room and a seat at the table. Had stayed because of a boy who needed someone to sit beside him every evening with a book. Because that was the thing she knew how to give, and he was the thing that needed it. She looked at the bird book open on Eli's chest, the page on hawks, the one he'd had her read 3 times that week. She looked at the house around her, the wood stove, the mismatched chairs from 4 different sources that somehow worked together, wildflowers in the coffee can on the counter that Eli had picked from the south field 3 days ago because he decided the kitchen needed them, the sound of a house being lived in, not endured, not merely survived, lived in, by people who had chosen it and kept choosing it. Miss Lorraine Carter, former 2nd grade teacher, current resident of a farmhouse that had been kept alive by stubbornness and need, and the grace of people who show up for each other without being asked, sat in her chair with a sleeping 5-year-old on her lap, and felt, the first time in a long time, that she was exactly where she was supposed to be, which was enough, more than enough. It was the whole thing. Bucknell stood at the railing a moment longer. Biscuit padded out from inside and came to lean lightly against his leg, looking out at the dark field, present, patient, taking his job seriously. Tomorrow there would be more fence to check. Fourth room needed a new subfloor. Brenda Wright needed to call Lewis. The fraud investigation was open and the road ahead was long. None of it was going to be simple. Finding Vickers in Alabama would take time. Playing the old brake records, if anything had survived the shop's multiple ownership changes, would take more. Building a case strong enough to tie Raymond Harris to what happened on Highway 16 would require the kind of patience that his father had tried to exercise, and his mother had understood was necessary. It would require the state. Multiple agencies, months, maybe longer. There was no guarantee of a courtroom, no guarantee of a verdict. The law was slow and the evidence was old, and the chain had gaps that 10 years of absence had made wider. But it was open. The investigation was open. The promissory note was on record. The development fraud was documented across 17 families and 22 years. Reed had the file he'd been keeping for a decade. Raymond Harris, for the first time in all of that, was no longer operating in the dark. He knew what Darnell had. He knew what was coming. And a man like that, who had spent 22 years relying on patience and obscurity, a difference the moment both of those things were gone. Darnell pressed his hand flat on the railing, felt the wood under his palm, rough, weathered, repaired in one section with newer lumber that didn't quite match. Vanessa's repair, until she was here. It held solid. He thought about his father at a kitchen table in this house, writing a final demand letter in careful printing. The letters deliberate, the tone formal, the expectation reasonable, liked that a system designed to address this kind of thing would address it if you gave it the right materials. Mailing the letter, trusting the process, his father had been right that the system needed the right materials, just hadn't lived long enough to provide them himself. His mother had understood something more. That careful wasn't always enough when what was coming at you had resources and time, and the ability to make things disappear. Answer to that kind of patience was to build something that could outlast you. Evidence in the hands of someone trustworthy. A letter in an envelope with a left hook T, a box under a floorboard with a name on the side. When you're ready. Hadn't been ready for 10 years. He thought about what that had cost. Not just this farm, not just this case, not just the 17 families who had lost things while the son of Thomas and Patricia Cooper drove in circles in the opposite direction. He thought about the 10 years themselves, the parking lots, the gas station coffee, the motel rooms, the jobs that needed hands and didn't ask questions, the particular loneliness of a life lived in motion, which felt like freedom for a while, and then felt like something else, eventually felt like the inside of a room you'd locked yourself in and misplaced the key to. He thought about the laugh he'd forgotten. The sound of his mother's laugh, lost so gradually he hadn't noticed it going. 1,000 small things that slip away by staying away. Sounds and smells and the particular quality of light at different times of day on this land. Things that didn't seem like they could be lost because they'd always been there. Until they weren't. That was the thing nobody told you about grief. Not the acute kind, not the phone call in the dark at 3 a.m, not the cold water in the naval base bathroom. The other kind, the slow kind, the kind that worked on you from the outside in, quietly, while you were busy driving in the other direction. You didn't outrun grief by moving fast enough. You just carried it with you in different shapes. He'd been carrying it for 10 years. Now he was here, and the house was behind him, warm and full, and Vanessa was beside him. Not saying anything, not needing to, just standing at the railing in a dark blue sweater with the field in front of her and the stars coming up. A was asleep inside, with a retired schoolteacher and a bird book, and a probably dreaming about patrol's expression on his face. And Monica was at the kitchen table with her laptop, already pulling the documentation together for the state investigators, already thinking 3 steps ahead, already doing the next thing because the next thing needed doing, and she was the person who did that. Iskit was leaning against his leg, looking out at the dark with focused contentment, taking his job seriously. This was the house. This was what it held, not just memory, but just a coat, hook his mother had drilled 3 times before she got the angle right. Not just his father's boots by the back door shaped to feet that no longer walked in them. Not just the photograph on the wall and the box under the floor and 2 lines of heavy ink in the back of a $2 notebook. All of that. And also these people, Buck's particular collection of people who had found their way here by roads that had nothing to do with each other, and had stayed because staying was what the place asked of them, and had given it what they had, which turned out to be enough. Other than enough, Darnell thought about what he'd said to Vanessa about the North Room. A room for someone who'd run out of road. Not a program, not a charity. Just a real place for a while, right for someone who needed it. The way Vanessa and Monica had needed it. The way Miss Lorraine had needed it when her landlord sold. The way Darnell had needed it, even if he'd needed it differently, because that was what this place had always been. Not just land. Not just a parcel number on a county tax record. Not just an asset to be developed or held or traded. A place where people could stop moving for a while, where the work was real and the food came from the ground and the nights were wide and dark and full of stars, and nobody asked you to be anything other than what you were. His parents had made it that. Not by intention, maybe. Not as a mission statement, not as a philosophy, just by being the kind of people they were, and living the way they lived and trusting that the land would hold what they put into it, and it had held it, through 10 years of absence. Weather and rot and overgrown steps and delinquent tax notices. Through a fraudulent scheme that had been circling it for over a decade, it had held. Eyes of 3 women and a 5-year-old boy, and a dog named Biscuit, who had decided the right person was worth surrendering to. Darnell looked at the fence line he'd repaired, holding straight in the dark. The oak tree at the driveway entrance lay shaped by wind and years into something that looked exactly like what it was. A tree that had been here a long time and intended to keep being here. He'd come back later than he should have, a decade later, and the house had been here. In it had kept it alive. His mother had kept the documents safe. His father had written the warning in the back of a $2 notebook and left it where it would survive. Everything had waited for him, for whenever he was ready. He was here. And for the first time in 10 years, standing on the porch of the house where he grew up, Biscuit warm against his leg and the Georgia stars doing what they do above the fields. Darnell Cooper let his shoulders drop, let himself be finally, completely, exactly here, because the road had ended here. The ending was not what he'd expected. It was not ruin. It was not grief standing alone in an empty house. It was not 10 years of absence pressing down into nothing. It was this: 5 people and a dog, and a mason jar of wildflowers on the kitchen windowsill. A boy who had defended this farm with a wooden rifle before he was old enough to understand what he was defending. A woman who had built a greenhouse out of salvaged lumber and library books. A retired school teacher who had sat down on a kitchen floor and laughed until she needed the wall. A sister who had spent 2 days in a county records office and found 17 families and the shape of a 22-year crime. A mother who had known. A father who had prepared, and a son who had finally come home. Darnell stayed.